Welcome back to Wealth Matters, a continued conversation about financial dominion. I'm your host, Lenita Reeves, MBA, and founder of Purpose House Publishing, the company that brings you Wealth Matters podcast, as well as other podcasts. This episode, we take a bit of a turn, and we're going to focus on all things personal finance and debt elimination. And in this episode, we have with us Amy Greene. She and her family paid off over $250,000 worth of debt in 2 years. She is a certified Dave Ramsey coach, and she is the owner of Amy Greene Financial. And anybody that's paid off over $250,000 of debt in 2 years, you want to hear what they have to say. So let's get into the episode. Remember to support the podcast. You can go to purposehouse.net/wealth matters. And you can see all the ways that you can support us through Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, so on and so forth. Our Cash App handle is $PH Publishing. Venmo is at Purpose House. PayPal is paypal.me/Purpose House. Let's get into this episode and find out how she crushed debt. Let's get started. The times and know what Israel, the people of God, ought to do really was resonating with me maybe a month and a half ago. And it was so apparent to me that we need to be focused on spreading the gospel of the kingdom, but also the finances that are necessary to do that. The finances. Yeah. If we're going to have the finances, then we definitely need to be out of debt. And we need to be generating multiple streams of income, whether that means entrepreneurship or passive investments or whatever. But we got to do something about this money situation right now. And so that is why we are doing Wealth Matters. And today I'm happy to have with me Amy Greene, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's going to be my partner today as we go through our Wealth Matters discussion. So Amy, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Pastor Lenita. My name is Amy Greene, and I am a financial coach. I work with people one-on-one, couples and individuals, to help them learn how to better manage their money so they can break the paycheck to paycheck cycle. They can get out of debt, build wealth, and serve God, serve the Lord, serve their families. We are taught in the Bible that we are to leave an inheritance to our children's children. And our discussion today is going to talk about really the first step in that, of getting out of debt.
Amen. And you guys know me. I'm also an MBA and the owner of Purpose House Publishing. And just it's been burning on me just to see the people of God free financially. So we're gonna jump into today's topic. And today's topic is all about getting rid of debt. Now, everybody has a personal connection to this topic, I believe, because at some point in our lives, we've all been in debt, even if we're out of debt right now. At some point, we've all been in debt, and debt in this country is what I call it's a way of life. I mean, people are so ingrained in debt in this country, and I've had the privilege to travel to other places, and it's just different here. For whatever reason, it's just different here. I mean, one of the first times I went to Africa, I saw the foundation of a home. And people were sitting out in the sun, just on the foundation, having dinner. And I was like, why? What happened to their house? And they explained it to me that you build by what you have. You don't take a loan to build a house. So if all the money you have right now is to build a foundation, you sit on that foundation and you enjoy your life until you get some more money. That was years ago before they unfortunately adopted our mortgage system. But that struck me. It struck me so much that first time I went to Africa that it was just a different mindset. It wasn't a borrow and get in debt mindset. It was a enjoy what you have at right where you are mindset. And before I start to ask Amy some questions, I just want to share with us that this year, May 2020, consumer household debt went to a record high. So there was a record set just this past May in 2020. Consumer debt rose to $14.3 trillion in the first 3 months of this year, 2020. That's 1.6 trillion higher than the record that was set in the middle of the financial crisis of 2008. So this year, debt was worse than the financial crisis of 2008, and we're at a record high in this country, in America. Consumer debt is at a record high. Interesting enough, credit card debt actually fell a little bit, but the rises were in student loans and automobile borrowing. So people are putting more money in their cars, getting into debt for their cars, and getting into debt for going to college. Also, this is really something. More than 189 million Americans have credit cards, and the average credit card holder has at least 4 cards. At least 4. So 189 million Americans have credit cards. And those that have them, out of those that have them, the average number that they have is 4 credit cards. 4 credit cards. Wow. And on top of that, each household with a credit card on average carries $8,398 in credit card debt. That's not good. To put it nicely, that's just not good. And then 1.4 million people filed bankruptcy. And the most common reasons were income loss, medical expenses, and unaffordable mortgages or foreclosure. So millions of people are filing bankruptcy, and that's not a good thing. So there is an issue with debt. We said all that to say, just to awaken us and make sure that we understand that debt is something that we should be looking to eliminate. We should not be casual about it. There's nothing good about debt. There's nothing good about it. And I'm so glad that Amy is with us, because she and her family were able to pay off $245,000 worth of debt. And so, Amy, I want you to just talk about, what has that meant for you? What were some keys, to paying off that amount of debt, and what has that meant for you and your family?
Absolutely. Right. So I've always had a personal love of personal finance. And, back in my 20s, I would read all the books and follow people, but nothing ever really made sense until 2014, 2015, when I found Dave Ramsey. So what I am about to talk about has a lot to do with the baby steps that Dave Ramsey has taught and he teaches today. And so we started our debt-free journey back in March of 2015. We paid off $245,000 in 24 months. Part of that, I will say, a huge piece
in 24 months?
In 24 months. And so a big
Okay.
piece of the debt was a condo that I had purchased before I got married back in 2008. I bought it all wrong. So I had 2 mortgages on it because I couldn't pay 20% down. And we had become upside down in it after 2008, and I met my husband, and I moved, we got married, I moved in with him, so we became landlords by default, and we finally decided to sell it. And that was about 200 of the 245. However, there's more to the story, because halfway through our debt-free journey, I lost my job. And so
wow.
we had it. I had a feeling it was coming. I had been given lots of signs to quit, and I did not listen. And so God was like, "That's it, you're out." So, and it's all a blessing, of course. However, so we kind of stopped our debt snowball when I had a feeling that I was going to lose my job, and so that helped. When that did occur, then we were able to not panic so much. But we also cash flowed a lot of things. We had to replace our roof, our furnace, and our water heater here at this house. And we funded in cash a round of IVF in vitro in vitro. So we were able to do that all during this time. And, it's really led us on this path to wanting to help others. And so, our own story is that, we cleared up all this debt. So now we have nothing except for our mortgage. We do have a mortgage on this house. However, there's no more debt. There's no credit cards. There's no debt on our cars. We're in this place where we have a fully funded emergency fund, and we are saving money for retirement, kids' college. We're saving up to buy a replacement vehicle whenever one of, probably my husband's car goes, and we're saving up for, any kind of vacations or travel, that kind of stuff. So everything that we do is paid for in cash. And so,
okay. I want you to back up a little bit, because everybody may not know what a fully funded emergency fund is.
Sure.
And I know that Dave Ramsey has a certain way that he defines that. So could you, when you say we have a fully funded emergency fund, we're paying, we're saving for our kids' college, all of that stuff. Can you first define, when you say we've got a fully funded emergency fund, what does that mean?
So that means that you have 3 to 6 months of expenses in the bank, just in a savings account, tucked away, not near your primary checking, because you don't want to have any temptation to accidentally use it. But it's just, figure out what are your bare bones expenses to live off of per month. So if there was a job loss, or worldwide pandemic, how much does it cost to live per month? And you want to take that number and multiply it anywhere between 3 and 6. So we're closer to the 6-month side of things, and so we have that money tucked away in a little money market account, just sitting, earning like 1 or 2% interest. So that's there in the event that we need, in the event of something happening, that we have that cash there. It's grandma's rainy day fund. So it's just there. It's insurance between you and life, is what it is.
Okay. What were some keys? I mean, were there times where you got discouraged, where you're like, oh, this is not worth it, let's just keep the mortgage, or let's just keep the car? I mean, were there times where you got discouraged in your journey to pay off all that debt? What was happening there?
So not for me. Once I found Dave Ramsey, I just drank the Kool-Aid and did all the things, right? Like I shaved my head and got the tattoos. But I listened to his radio show, which can be available on podcasts and on YouTube, and just listening to other people's stories through the debt-free screams, and listening to Dave, knowing that it's possible. I'm pretty intense. So once I start something, I'm going to finish it. So I did not get discouraged. My husband might have a different story on that one, or a different answer than I do. But, the key for us, though, I mean, we didn't really get discouraged, but knowing that it was possible was what kind of like led us there. And then knowing what was possible, getting through these baby steps, and not having any more payments. What could you do with all of your debt payments if you didn't have to make them? And everyone's like, well, if I just had more money, I would be okay. Well, not necessarily, right? So we have to make sure that we're doing smart things with that money. And so getting out of debt was what was key for us. But the true key to getting out of debt for us was the budget. I used to budget before I learned how to with Dave Ramsey, and it was all reactive. I would just keep track of what I spent, and like, oh, look, I spent a lot in groceries this month. And, so it wasn't, but now we have a budget where we say we are setting, this is our amount we spend in groceries, and we can't go over. And if we go over, we have to take, lower another category. So we started to really learn how to budget. And that was truly the key in terms of knowing, telling our money where to go instead of wondering where it went.
So I'm just a few key things I heard. One was, you were inspired by vision of what your life would be like if you didn't have to make all those monthly payments. So having a vision, dreaming about the future and what the future is going to look like once you get all this debt paid off. I think that's really, really key, because some people can't imagine a life without debt. They just feel like, I'm always going to be in debt. I'm always going to have this mortgage. I'll have it until I die. I'm always going to need a credit card. Some people feel like they're always going to need a credit card. But I think one of the significant things you said was, we had a vision of, what life was going to be like. And that dream of, not having that stuff over our head motivated us. And then the second thing that really stood out was budgeting. But not just budgeting, but budgeting in a particular way. Because I think a lot of people feel like, well, I got a budget. I know how to budget. I can do that. But there's a specific way, whether it's $0, you tell every penny that comes in where to go. There's a particular way that you need to budget if you're going to take a debt-free journey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, absolutely. So first thing is, I do always challenge my clients to have a why, that dream, that vision of what life could look like. And, I often ask, like, well, if money was no object, what would you do? what would you do if you had no payments? And just start to get people to think like, let's pretend, let's just dream a little. Let's just pretend, what could you do? What have you always wanted to do? What would it be like, if you could walk into a car dealership and pay cash for a car, that kind of stuff. And how would you feel? And so that's definitely a huge thing. But when it comes to the budgets, it's always a zero-based budget, which means income minus expenses equals zero. So even if you have leftover money after you walk through all your bills and expenses and things, then that money goes towards a purpose. Is it going towards savings? Maybe you need that emergency fund. Maybe it's going towards debt to pay off credit cards and cars, or maybe it's going to fund other things. Like I was talking before, maybe you're going to fund Christmas or vacations or kids' college or retirement. So it all has a purpose. And knowing what those things are and in what order is key, which is why the baby steps work so great. And so, yeah, you want a zero-based budget, but then you have to track your spending, which a lot of people don't do. They just kind of set these things and then they forget it. And then they realize that they way overspent. Food and groceries are huge on overspending, but they forget and they're like, oh, it'll be okay. But it's not. They have to make sure that you're looking at it at all times.
The tracking is really, really key. And just in general, I think sometimes people don't utilize just some of the general tools they can use to track their money, like alerts from their bank, getting text alerts or email alerts. And then I know that you guys have a tool. Is it the Every Dollar Budget? There's a tool or something that you guys have. And in that tool, you can actually connect your bank account to your budget so that there's actual tracking going on, and you can see where you're overspending, and you can see where you're about to overspend, so you don't do it. So those things are really, really key. The next question I want to ask you is that there are many myths about debt and credit in our nation. Two of them are, one, that you have to have a credit card, and then two, you can't go to college without going into debt. So many people feel like that is just a way of life. What would you say to those people or to that person?
Yeah. Well, I like to challenge, people to think about why. Why do you believe that? Why do you believe that that's the case? There's a saying that if you hear something told to you, however it's told to you, whether it's your own voice in your head or it's your parents or it's society, if they tell you something long enough, loud enough, you'll eventually just believe it. And we have been sold this myth that you have to have a credit score, that you have to have a credit card, that you can't rent a car without a credit card. And you can. Is it a little bit more challenging? Sure it is, but you can do things without having debt. And a lot of times it has to do with our upbringing. It could be a lot of different reasons. But the Bible tells us, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And we're told not to be normal. And normal in America is in debt and broke. And so we have to start to think, how can we, if society is telling me that I always have to be in debt and the little man can't get ahead, like, what if I just thought something different? What if I just said, well, why not? And, I think that, a lot of it is also just finding other people that have done it or who live differently. And so I'm an example of that I don't have a credit card at all. There's nothing in my name. And so everyone's like, how do you do that? And I'm like, well, we have cash. A debit card does the same thing as a credit card. So there are ways of kind of bucking the system, if you will, and not following the norm. And so how do we do that? Some people won't. I'm not going to convince everybody to get out of debt if they firmly believe that. Henry Ford has a quote that if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. And so some people just are going to believe that they'll always have a car payment. But I'm telling you that it's possible that you don't have to. You don't have to if you decide not to.
Okay, so I know one of the baby steps, you cut up your credit card. What do you say to the person that says, I need at least one, just for ease of travel, ease of renting a car? I mean, what's wrong with just having one credit card?
Mm. It's a slippery slope. I have friends who have credit cards, and there are other financial coaches out there that teach kind of, you could call it a responsible use of credit cards and how to hack the system with points and all of that. I just feel like, you're playing with snakes. It's just like trying to beat the house in poker, right? Or any kind of gambling in a casino. You're trying to beat the house. You're not going to win. And no millionaire ever said that they made their millions with airline miles or Amex points or any, or their cash back on their Discover. Oh my gosh, I made all my millions. It's not the case. And those are all gimmicks to get you to buy more. And so it's definitely, when I work with clients, I understand that it takes time for people to change habits and mindsets. And so we start with baby step one, which is that $1,000 starter emergency fund. I might, if they decide to keep one card, I'm like, okay, well, hide it somewhere in your house, put it in a block of ice, like freeze it in a block of ice. If you need, now you need it. Now it's gonna be hard to get to, but take it off all of your accounts online. Amazon is not connected to it, but it's learning to find a new way. Because if you don't have debt, then you have cash, then you have money, and that's how you start to buy things. And so I understand that there's sometimes a weaning process that needs to happen, and that's okay. We can kind of work through that, but I want everyone off the credit cards because it's a slippery slope.
Okay. And I think that that's absolutely valid. And one other thing I would just say along those lines is that if you're taking a debt-free journey, then part of that is changing your habits. And a lot of us get into trouble because we have bad spending habits. We're not disciplined in our spending. We don't know how to tell our money where to go and what to do. And eliminating the credit card is part of changing those habits and developing good discipline. So I would say to somebody that you gotta at least try it. Like, get rid of it for now. At least try it, because we're in the situation, we're in debt because we've made bad decisions, bad spending decisions, by and large. Now, sometimes life does happen. Medical bills that are unforeseen can happen to people, and that may be how they end up in debt. But for the most part, most people are in debt because of the choices that they made. And so if we want to make better choices, then we have to develop better habits. And I think that's part of just putting the credit cards away and getting rid of the credit cards. So I definitely see the logic in that. Yeah. Definitely see the logic in that. So here's my next question. Is there any kind of good debt? Is any debt good debt?
No, none. And it's funny because when I first picked up the Total Money Makeover book by Dave Ramsey, he has a chapter that says all debt is bad. And I was like, that's just not true. And I'm reading the book, but it is, all debt is bad. And what I teach is that we don't frown upon a mortgage because, buying a house is such a huge investment. But we try to teach it that you do a 15-year fixed rate mortgage where the payment's no more than a quarter of your monthly take home pay. So you're not buying too much house. It's very easy to have too much house, and then you feel like you can never pay that off. Because we want you to be eventually debt free. And so like we still have a mortgage, and we plan on buying a bigger house, like eventually upgrading into something larger. But it's going to be a lot, right? Because I live in New Jersey, so it's crazy. But the mortgage is okay. It's not frowned upon, but ideally, eventually, you'll have a paid for house.
Okay. Yeah. What did you guys, or was there anything that you had to sacrifice during your debt-free journey? I had a guest a few weeks ago who said that he cut his cable off and he cut his internet off. And I was shocked. I was like, how did you survive without internet? He said he cut it off. He cut his cable off, he cut his internet off, and he just began to just look for things that he could eliminate. Were there things that you guys eliminated or sacrificed during your journey to pay off that $245,000?
Yeah, so the first thing to go is cable. And I'm not a fan of television anymore, right? Like I used to watch it a lot, but my personal belief is that's a waste of time. So we cut cable, and it was weird because when we decided to cut cable, we were a little apprehensive about it, but we finally just did it and we never looked back. And so we don't have cable today. We don't need it. We do have internet. I'm sorry, internet's a way of life.
I do too.
Yeah, because now everything's online. So we need the internet, but we cut cable. We really stopped buying clothing. Only if it was a true need. We had a very small clothing budget per month. We really did not go out to eat. The good thing is that we have little kids. So even during our debt-free journey, our daughter at the time was right around 2. So, you're not taking a 2-year-old out to eat. So that was good. So we kind of had some things that kind of kept us low, but in terms of that spending, but we really just didn't do much. We did not do, if we traveled, the money was a gift from other family members so that we could travel. And so that was the compromise that my husband and I made. So we just we didn't do anything. We tried to say no to a lot of things, not going out to eat, not hanging out with people. And if we did, then, sometimes it'd be our own spending cash. If like my husband joined his friends after work for a drink, use your own cash. It's your choice. So we kind of really pared down the budget. We sold stuff. We sold stuff around the house, and I got a job, like a little job working for Tips somewhere just to help at the time bring in some money and to get out of the house a little bit too. So yeah, so we did a couple of things like that.
I think that's really, really key. I saw a success story, Dave Ramsey success story, where people sold their furniture and they would have people come to their house and then people were like, "Where's your furniture?" And they were like, "I'm on a journey. Hey, Papa Squat, let's hit it. Let's go."
Wow.
They sold it. So yeah, they sold their furniture. They had no furniture in their living room. They were just willing to make the sacrifice to get to the point of being able to scream, "I'm debt free," And so I think that a lot of times we're not prepared to make those sacrifices. And sometimes that's why we don't get to where we want to get to.
That's true. And, the deeper you sacrifice, the faster you'll reach that goal. So in anything, whether it's personal fitness or, or getting out of debt, how much you're willing to give up. And it's not usually what you're willing to do. It's usually what you're willing to give up. Mm-hmm. So that's usually the harder piece of it, is to give up stuff.
Yeah. So here's a question that someone asked me. Cool. Is it advisable to take the mortgage relief that's being offered now and put that money towards paying off a debt?
So here's the thing with the mortgage relief, it's a forbearance, and the forbearance really just means patience. So they'll let you go a few months without paying, without penalty. I think it's up to 3 months. On that 4th month, they expect payment on month 4 plus the 3 others that you haven't paid yet. So now you're looking at 4 months due all at one time. Okay. So unless something's happening where you have that money, I really wouldn't play with it. And so you have to be prepared that in month 4, you're going to pony up 4 months of mortgage payments so that you keep your loan current. Otherwise, it goes into what's called a loan modification, which has some downsides. It can ding your credit a little bit. It extends the length of your loan. There's a bunch of other minutia in there that you need to really read the fine print on, because every mortgage company is going to be different. But a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm just going to tack that onto the end." Well, now it turns into a modification, which is like a step before foreclosure. So there's all these little micro steps. So I say no. I think, if you want to get out of debt, you keep what I call the 4 walls current, and you keep them current always. So your house, your mortgage or rent needs to be paid. You need to pay food, utilities, and transportation so you can get to work. So transportation, if you need gas in your car payment, insurance, but those are the 4 walls. Those things we don't take breaks on. We don't skip, because if your car gets repoed or you get kicked out of your apartment, then now you're really in trouble. So we don't want that to happen.
Okay. So just in my mind, just to recap. So debt-free journey starts with a budget, a $0 budget where you're telling every penny where to go.
Every penny. And you do it every month. Yeah, you do it every month. So the budget you do every single month before the month begins. Absolutely. Because July is going to be different than June, and September is going to be different than August. So every month is slightly different. Yes, a lot of things stay the same, but the things that change, you want to make sure you're accounting for.
Okay, great. So the budget. Yeah. No, that's good. The budget, and then the $1,000
starter emergency. Yep, that's a starter emergency fund. That's baby step 1. That's just $1,000 set aside so that you can stop using your credit cards. So if you get a flat tire, or I don't know, a kid breaks his arm and you have a $500 bill to the ER, you can cover that without any major hiccup. I know it's not enough, but $1,000 kind of gets you to a place of, I mean, 64% of Americans could not cover $1,000 emergency. So if you have $1,000, you're doing better than half the population. So, so that's your starter, and then you start paying off debt using the debt snowball.
Okay, and the debt snowball means you pick your smallest debt, you pay that off first, and then you go from there in increasing amount of the debt. Is that right?
Right. You list your debt smallest to largest based on balance, and you pay the smallest one off first. So you pay minimums on everything else, but anything you can throw extra on that smallest debt, clean it up, and then that minimum payment and what you were throwing at it goes to the next one. So every time you pay off a debt, the payments start to pick up snow for the next one down the line.
Cool. All right. Wonderful. And then after you snowball everything, hallelujah.
Yes. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yes.
After you snowball everything.
Praise Jesus moment.
Yes.
You have a little party. You can have a, yeah.
I can't wait to have my party. I can't wait to have my party. Oh, I'm going to get there in Jesus' name.
Yes, you will.
After that, then you start looking at retirement and saving for your kids' college and all of that.
Well, right, sort of. So after the debt snowball, you go back to that emergency fund and you build that up to 3 to 6 months.
There we go.
And so that then now you have 3 to 6 months of a cushion. So before you had a little cushion, and it makes you a little nervous, which is good, so that you can go through your debt snowball faster. And then you build that up to 3 to 6 months of expenses.
How do you approach that? How do you approach building 3 to 6 months of your expenses? How is the approach different from paying off the debt, the snowball? How do you approach that?
It's really the same. You want to do it with the same intensity. So then what you're doing is all of that money that was going towards debt and any extra, like a lot of people will pick up maybe an extra job, or they were selling stuff or doing anything they can for extra money to come in. All of that starts now going, instead of going towards debt, you just take that and put it in the savings and the emergency fund. So then you just start to pile up cash.
See, Amy, this is what I want people to understand. This requires hustle.
Yes.
It requires hustle. I mean, if we're going to do this thing, we're going to have to hustle. Like, we're not going to be, at home binge watching, Marvel or Captain America. We're not going to be home binge watching stuff. We're going to have to hustle, right?
Yes.
We're going to have to put some extra effort into this, because we built up years of this debt. It's not just going to go away without some serious effort. So even in, building up that 3 to 6 months of expenses, hey, some people got extra jobs, some people did Uber, Lyft, whatever they could do just to bring in some extra money.
Yes.
I've watched the stories. People did some pretty amazing things.
People are awesome. I have a client she's a school teacher in middle school. She's a music teacher, and she's been killing it in the sense she's been working for Instacart, and now she's added like DoorDash and a couple other ones, but making $1,200 a week. But she is working like 60 hours a week, 60 to 80. So she's on fire. I mean, I will tell you, she's single with no kids, so that's a huge caveat. But she is so gung-ho to be debt-free by the end of the year. I think she'll be debt-free. She might be debt-free by August. We don't know. We'll see. Because once school starts, then her hours, she has to kind of cut back on hours as they go back to school. But it's all possible. It's what are you willing to do to win? What are you willing to do? And
amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
So if you have questions for Amy, please type them in the comments so that I can make sure that we address your question. So there's another question I want to ask you, which, I've been looking into myself. Most self-made millionaires, most didn't go to college. And if they did, they didn't go into debt to go to college.
Right.
And many of them never had credit cards. So talk to us about why being debt-free is so important for someone who aspires to be a millionaire.
Well, because your greatest wealth building tool is your income. So if your income is going out in the form of car payments and credit card payments and personal loan payments, you got nothing left to keep for yourself and to build wealth with. And so you know, you have to be able to keep that money, because if you don't have payments, you've got money, and then you can start to put money aside, and the compound interest, of course, on investments is pretty radical when you start to look at it over time. And it's a slow and steady race. So the longer you're in debt and the longer you don't have money going into investments, the less time you have to earn that interest and for it to compound. So, being debt free is just, it's the tool to become a millionaire. Like debt is not a wise thing for building wealth.
Great. And so just to talk a little bit more about what we mean when we say building wealth, we want to get to the point where our money is making money for us. And the way that we do that is through investments. And if we don't have anything left over, if we're always strapped paying debt, we don't have anything left over to invest, then our path to millionaire status is going to take longer, or we're going to have an extreme breakthrough with a business idea or something else. Right. But most millionaires, according to the research, became millionaires by paying themselves first through investing. And so that is why we got to get rid of the debt, so that we have money that we can invest and allow to generate what Amy is talking about, that compound interest through investments, whether that's a 401k or some other kind of mutual fund investing or whatever. But we've got to have that extra money to begin to invest, so that the money begins to work for us. If we're always paying bills, the money's never working for us. It's always working against us. And that is why it's a vicious cycle. Yes. And so I think that is something that we've got to change our mind about. We've got to attack debt so that we have more money that works for us rather than, works against us. There are some questions here. There's some questions, so that's great. So anybody aspiring to be a millionaire, one of the things you want to do is just have an all-out war on debt. Debt is your enemy. Yeah. You just want to adopt that mindset that I'm going to be a millionaire and debt is my enemy. Debt is
the borrower is slave to the lender.
Say that again, please.
The borrower is slave to the lender.
The borrower is slave, and that is scripture.
That's scripture. And so you are in bondage to Discover, American Express, The Gap, whoever, plus, Ford Motor Credit, Honda, whoever you have, that you're paying bills to. So you're in debt. You're working for them, not for yourself and not for God. So, we all want to be, we're called to be stewards of our money. And good stewardship means that we are doing smart things with our money. And if the Bible says stay away from debt, you stay away from debt. And so that's what we teach, and that's what works. And there's a millionaire study done with 10,000 millionaires through Dave Ramsey, Everyday Millionaire book by Chris Hogan. And most of those guys, they don't have debts. And if they had debt early on, they got rid of it and moved on. But building wealth is a marathon and not a sprint. It takes time and diligence, and it's the slow cooker method. It's not the microwave. And so you have to it's consistency over time. And if all your money's going out in debt payments, you can't be consistent with investing. Yeah,
I totally agree. We're going to there's some questions here in the comments, and I definitely want us to address them. Before we do that, though, I just want to stress this point to anybody listening. Teach your kids to start early. Teach your kids to start early saving. Teach your kids to start early investing, because the more time you have to invest, the more that compound interest is going to work for you. I have a 16-year-old, and we are having these conversations. Like, any money granddaddy gives you, you're saving it. You're not going to spend it. We've got to, because the earlier they start, the better off they will be. And so whatever you're hearing and whatever you're learning, teach it to your children. Okay, so there's a question here in the comments, and it says, what is the number one hurdle you find for those trying to get out of debt? That's the first question.
The number one, so personal finance is 80% behavior and 20% knowledge. Okay. And so often the hurdle could be changing behaviors, changing mindsets. And so you have to change your whole way of thinking about money and all your habits with money. So, the first step I say is to do a budget and start to see where your money is going. And often that brings enough awareness to start to say, okay, well, because you have to make your budget fit. Like you can't spend more than you make. So that usually helps people to see where they're erring. You know, if there's a problem and overspending happening. But usually it's they have to learn that it's behavior. You have to tell yourself no. And a lot of people don't want to do that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Forgive us. We didn't do Dave Ramsey at church, but we did do Crown Financial. We had a whole like 10-week, almost 14-week Crown Financial series at our church. And one of the things that they also tell you to do is to track your spending for 30 days. And when you do that, you will be amazed at the things that you spend money on and you don't even think about. You know, I have 3 small kids, and one of the fights for me is to not eat out. And because, well, not so much now with coronavirus, we're all in the house, but before coronavirus, we were always, you know, we were on the run and so on and so forth. And so sometimes it's just easier to go through the drive-through and get them fed than to come home, make them wait till you cook and all of that. So just if you track the money for 30 days, you'll see where your habits need to change. And I have saved so much money during coronavirus on eating out, on gas, on just various and sundry things, just as a result of having to be in the house with the kids. So I would second that. There's another question for you. Okay. It says, do we also have, I don't understand this question. It says, with the idea of financial advisors, do we also have financial therapists? I'm not quite sure what that question means, but.
Well, I guess so financial coaches used to be called financial counselors, but that term counselor can sometimes seem negative. Financial advisors help you with investments. They can take your money and actually purchase mutual funds and IRA, you know, to put your money into IRAs and other investment vehicles. I help people learn how to budget, how to manage that monthly cash flow, and how to, you know, how do you negotiate with a credit card company to, if you're on, you know, settling a debt, like how do you do all that stuff? So that's what a coach does. They're more the therapist, because we're trying to help you change your mindset and your behavior when it comes to money. Okay.
All right. Okay, great. Yeah. I'm glad you could answer that.
Yeah. A lot of my clients tell me that a lot of my clients have said that it feels like a therapy session. So
Okay, great. Any other questions? Go ahead and post them in the comments, because we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. If you have questions for Amy, go ahead and post them in the comments. So we talked about why being debt-free is so important to someone who aspires to be a millionaire. Why is being debt-free important for the kingdom and just for believers in general?
So many Christians want to give. We want to help others, and we want to give to the church. We want to give to other people in need, but we can't if our own financial house is a mess, or we don't have the money because it's all going out. And so, it says that, we are to take care of our own households first, or we're worse than an unbeliever. So we have to take care of our own house. We have to make sure that we are being good stewards of our money within our own house. With our own budget, meaning getting out of debt and having the emergency fund and making sure that we're stable. Just like we put the oxygen mask on ourselves first when in an airplane before we put it on our kids, we want to make sure we don't pass out so we can help other people. We want to do that with our money. And then once our own home is set and we can take care of our needs and we've got ourselves in a good stable footing, now we can really give. So just think that if what would happen to the kingdom of God if the people of God were out of debt, and how much could they give? Yes. How much could they tithe? How much could we support missionary, the missionaries and all of the things that are going on? If we as Americans even just got out of debt and wanted to be givers, whether we tithe to a church or not, we could outgive the government in terms of like charitable giving. So it's something that, I firmly believe that a lot of people really just want to be givers, but we have to find, you can give a little to you can give a lot, but you've got to get yourself in a place where you can financially do so without harming your own family.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. You said that if Americans would get out of debt, they could outgive the government.
Yeah.
And that's very, very true.
It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much at all. in Financial Peace University, Dave Ramsey talks about this. The last class has been updated, but if we just gave 10% more, we could build like 40 other St. Jude hospitals. Like, it's amazing, like what a little bit extra in money, could do for the world, for our country and for the world.
Wonderful. I'd like you, I've got one more question for you, but this is just coming up. I'd like you to talk about the kind of clients that you've helped. I mean, single moms, families with children. I mean, can you talk about the kind of clients that you've helped and the successes that they've had?
Yes. So I have helped people who are either single, like young professionals, single, not married, no kids. One woman, she was in Brooklyn. In 6 months, she paid off 60 grand in student loan debt, and she's probably debt free. She's definitely debt free now. I help single moms, people who are, in the hole every month. So when they do their budget, they're like negative. Like this one single mom, she was negative $721 a month. And so, we got her to the place where she was cash flow positive, and she was now she was not only breaking even, but she was bringing in extra money. And so, we were getting her to this place where now she can start the baby step process. I've helped, married couples, get through Christmas without adding debt, and to refill their oil tanks for heat without stress. And so being able to get them to this place of knowing where their money is going, knowing how to apply these principles into their life. Other clients are just gung-ho. It just depends on where they're at. I've got clients with kids, either grown kids or in school, just trying to change their life, just looking at their financial status, and, people all over the map, if you will. I've got people in, clients in crisis that, we've tried everything and they are facing bankruptcy, and it all just depends on where they are and how can we help them, and what are all the moving parts in their world. So there's lots of things that can happen, but it's so rewarding to watch these clients as they go through it, and they start to change the trajectory of their finances. It's really fun.
I just, wow. She paid off $60,000 of student loan debt in
6 months. In 6 months. Yeah. And I've got another woman, she's paid off about 40 grand. She had people have, their 401k loans, and she paid that off recently. So it was about 38,000 total in debt from other credit cards and other things. We start to look at everything in your financial world. So some people have things that can help them. And we just start to put everything together and to see how we can make it go faster. But yeah, some clients are really, really amazing in terms of what they can accomplish if they're really focused.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last round for questions. Last call for questions. As a coach, so here's my final question for you.
Sure.
As a coach, if you had to choose one piece of advice and one piece only to give to someone in debt, what would it be?
It would be to stop using debt. Just stop. Cut up the credit cards. If this person is in debt and wants to get out, you have to stop using debt, because you can't borrow your way out. And so you have to just stop. And and that would be my one piece of advice. Cut up the credit cards. You can't borrow. If debt is off the table, then you will come up with other ways, creative ways to, fix the car, to do whatever it is that you're trying to do. And you would just, you might put Band-Aids on it for now, and that's okay. Put a tarp over the roof. It's all right. We'll get through it. But if debt is off the table, you'll be much better off than if you were to keep borrowing to fix whatever emergency is happening.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. There's a question about refinancing.
Okay.
About refinancing. Sure. How do you?
It is, yeah, for housing, for a house, I would assume. So when it comes to refinancing your home, I recommend it if you can save at least 1% on your interest. And so then it makes financial sense to pay closing costs and all of that. The other piece of it is to determine how long does it take to break even on the closing costs you pay. So I'm just going to use some round numbers. Like, let's say you save 1 percentage point, and that's $2,000 in interest a year, but you pay $5,000 in closing costs. Now everything's going to be different, but it's going to take you 2.5 years to break even on the $5,000 you spent to close, to refinance. Are you going to be in that house longer than 2.5 years? If you are, then sure, do it. Great. You know, it'll take 2.5 years to finally start to recoup that savings, and then it makes sense. I also like it if you can refinance down to a 15-year fixed, because then you'll save even more on interest because you've shortened the term. But you want to save at least that 1%, and then see how long you're going to be in that house and when you break even.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Amy, tell us how we can find you, your website, your Facebook. Sure. Just give us all the information.
Absolutely. So yeah, I don't have my website really is ramseycoach.com/Amy Greene with an extra E, FC as in financial coach. Or you can find me at Facebook at facebook.com/Amy Greene FC as well. I do lots of live stuff, and I'm on Facebook a lot. I am also on Instagram at Amy Greene FC. Still learning that technology. I'm not so good with the Instagram, so bear with me on that. And if you want to barter for some Instagram classes and coaching, I will barter. We can trade services. But yeah, you can find me anywhere there, and I look forward to anyone. If you have other questions, you want to reach out, I'm happy to talk with you and help you answer your question.
All right, wonderful. Well, Amy, it has been great to have you.
Yes, thank you.
I'm so glad that we
wonderful.
Connected. I mean, just great just to have this conversation with you. And I'm sure that those that were watching and listening, they've learned something and have just heard something that they can take away and start to apply to their journey. Let's stay on our journey. If you haven't started your debt-free journey, please start your journey today. And let's stay on that journey, and let's encourage one another, because wealth matters for the kingdom. When we are debt-free, as you heard Amy say, we can give generously. And I love that about what you guys do at Dave Ramsey. You don't just get out of debt, but you give extravagantly. And I think that is the whole point of it. This is a season where if we want to win souls, we can't just walk up to somebody and say, be warmed and filled. You know, no, I just lost my family member to coronavirus. We have to put resources into that. You know, people are losing their loved ones. They don't necessarily have money to bury their loved ones. You know, people are going through. And the more that we can pour resources into that, the more people are going to be open to our Jesus and our gospel. So we need money like never before. And that is what God was speaking to me when he said, we have to be like the sons of Issachar who have understanding of the times. These are times where we need money like never before. If we know that perilous times are going to come in the last days, then we know we're going to need money like never before. Amy, thank you again for joining us. We hope to have you back. And everybody enjoy the rest of your day. God bless you.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you.